eastern Uganda. At least 31 people are dead after floodwaters triggered by a landslide destroy homes and bury livestock. After more than a decade as allies, two of Ivory Coast's largest political parties face off in local elections this weekend. And we'll tell you about one airline's plan to open up Africa's skies. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Massive landslides in eastern Uganda have killed at least 31 people. The landslides were triggered by days of heavy rain in the region near the country's border with Kenya. Regional disaster preparedness official Martin Award told reporters that the landslide pushed huge boulders into a river which burst its banks late Thursday, and the water swept away the people. Search and rescue teams continue to sift through the debris in the foothills of Mount Elgon, about 250 kilometers from Kampala. They say it's likely more victims will be found since the landslide occurred at a time when many people are in the area to go to market and gather water. A local member of parliament says the landslide destroyed bridges, washed out roads, and has swept away a school. In March 2010, at least 100 people were killed in mudslides in the town of Bududa, and injuries or deaths have been reported every year since then during the wet season. Efforts by Uganda's government over the years to relocate area residents has not been successful. Malawi has one of the highest rates of child marriage in the world, with 1 in 2 girls marrying before the age of 18. The practice limits the education girls receive and is most common in rural areas where dowries or wedding gifts to the girls' parents are attractive to families in poverty. But as Islamic Masina reports from Dedza, Malawi, one district chief is annulling thousands of juvenile marriages while facing resistance and death threats.
Annie Epifano was 16 years old when she was forced into a marriage with a 21-year-old man who abused and beat her.
I was forced into marriage because of the problems facing our family. My parents were very poor, and they forced me into marriage. At that time, I was too young.
Epifano is one of more than 3,000 teen and child brides rescued by Chief Teresa Kachindamoto. Her campaign to stop underage marriage was sparked in 2004 when she came across a baby being breastfed by a 13-year-old girl.
My head was spinning. So I said, who is the father of this baby? Then she pointed out a boy playing football. So I called him to come. Then when he came, I said, is this your baby? He said, oh yes, he's my baby. How old are you? I will be 14 next 2 weeks. I was shocked.
Kachindamoto, who leads 1 million people in Dedza, forced all junior chiefs to agree to end underage marriage and sent most of the girls back to school. But some village elders were opposed and even threatened to kill her for breaking with the early marriage tradition.
So they said, oh, you want to die soon, chief? You are still young. So I said, okay, if you want to kill me, let me finish my mission. Then when I finish this mission, then you can kill me.
Refusing to be intimidated, Kachindamoto suspended 5 chiefs who took bribes to allow the banned form of wedlock. Village headman Galan Nenji says the $15 fee he earned from allowing an underage union was too tempting at the time.
I allowed child marriages because at that time I didn't have any money to buy sugar. I thought the chief would not know.
Ruling since 2003, after the male chiefs in her family passed away, Kachindamoto is a rare female chief in the Ngoni culture. Her stand against underage marriage has challenged the tradition, but her support for Malawi's youth has made her a celebrated leader. Lamek Masina for VOA News, Dedza, Malawi.
6 African women with albinism, a condition which affects pigmentation of the skin, hair and eyes, set out to climb Tanzania's Mount Kilimanjaro early this month. Their goal was to raise the visibility of people living with the condition and challenge widely held stereotypes about them. The climbers from across Africa have all suffered abuse and discrimination, and in one case, horrific violence because of their albinism. Henry Ridgewell has our report.
6 women with albinism, 6 Africans determined to transform the way the world views their condition by taking on the biggest challenge of their lives.
As I walk through the valley of life and death, I will fear no evil as I take every step. With my faith, I've moved mountains. With my faith, I'll be speaking on mountains. I'm on my way, on my way.
The climbers set off October 1st. Scaling Africa's highest mountain is no easy feat for any climber. For those with albinism, it is an exceptional challenge.
I've never had to deal with that much like sun exposure and to have my low vision challenged to that extent. So definitely a really difficult environment.
Nkomanzi says growing up with albinism in Zimbabwe was not as bad as in many other countries, where myth and superstition can often lead to abuse and violence. But she suffered discrimination on a daily basis.
I was very much made fun of at school. I was harassed typically in public and just walking across the street.
Despite tremendous adversity, Nkomanzi graduated from Yale University in the United States and is now an educational consultant. Mariamu Stafford overcame perhaps the greatest challenge. She was attacked in her home by a group of men who hacked off her arms with a machete. She now runs her own textiles business in Tanzania. All of the women volunteered for the climb to try to raise the visibility of people with albinism.
Especially when women with albinism are discussed in media, for example, the narrative is usually that of victimhood and pity. And we wanted to show that we are more capable of accomplishing and succeeding in challenges that go far beyond the stereotypes that we are usually attached to.
4 team members reached camp at 4,700 meters before stopping on medical advice. 2 continued the climb, Nkomanzi and Kenyan teammate Jane Waitera, who had to stop just 20 meters from the summit due to a knee injury. In the end, it was Nkomanzi who represented the team at the 5,895-meter summit of Kilimanjaro, reaching the top October 7th. Remarkable personal achievements for all the climbers, and perhaps a step forward in the fight to end discrimination and abuse against people with albinism. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Indeed, remarkable. Now, after more than a decade as allies, 2 of Ivory Coast's largest political parties face off in local elections on Saturday. After an acrimonious divorce that is making Ivorians nervous ahead of a presidential poll in 2020. The alliance struck in 2005 between President Alassane Ouattara's African Democratic Assembly and former President Henry Konan Bedi's Democratic Party of Cote d'Ivoire. The PDCI was meant to dominate for generations and help heal the political rifts that led to civil war 3 years earlier. But the pact that propelled Ouattara to presidential election victories in 2010 and 2015 collapsed last month as the parties bickered over whose candidate should now be in the pole position. Now, both the RDR and PDCI are casting Saturday's vote for hundreds of mayors and regional council seats as a test of strength heading into 2020. Some voters say the coalition split had heightened their concerns about a return to violence. For more insight on the political situation in Ivory Coast, Nyaka Lagoke, Professor of Pan-African Studies at Lincoln University, Pennsylvania, joins me live via Skype. Welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Vincent.
Now, Professor Lagoke, look, their political coalitions are formed across the continent. They do break up sometimes. Why should the breakup of these two in Ivory Coast cause so much tension?
Thank you very much.
Can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
All right, looks like there's a little technical problem there. Hopefully we fix that and come back to you. Trying to get to Nyakalag, okay. But meanwhile, if we may continue here, let's now turn to yet another story here. U.S. President Donald Trump says he is very concerned about the fate of Jamal Khashoggi. This is the Saudi journalist who disappeared last week while visiting the Saudi consulate in Turkey, in Istanbul. Now, the president says he is reluctant to suspend a $110 billion U.S. arms deal with Saudi Arabia over that particular issue. So VOA diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain reports for us from the State Department.
After more than a week, there is still no sign of Jamal Khashoggi, a Saudi journalist and a columnist for the Washington Post, who's been living in voluntary exile in the United States. President Donald Trump was asked if the U.S. should have warned him of intelligence that he might be in danger.
Well, it's not our country, it's in Turkey, and it's not a citizen, as I understand it. But a thing like that shouldn't happen. It is a reporter with the Washington Post, and it's something like that should not be allowed to happen. Something like that should not happen, and we intend to get to the bottom of it.
Trump told Fox News that the U.S. has investigators in Turkey and is working with Turkey and with Saudi Arabia. State Department spokesperson Heather Nauert says Washington wants facts from the Saudis.
We have communicated with the Saudi ambassador to the United States. It's my understanding that he is on his way back to Saudi Arabia. We have said to him that we expect information upon his return to the United States.
Trump's first foreign trip was to Saudi Arabia last year, cultivating a close relationship with Saudi rulers. Trump is reluctant to end U.S. arms sales to Riyadh if allegations the Saudis murdered Khashoggi were to prove true.
They're spending $110 billion purchasing military equipment and other things. If we don't sell it to them, they'll say, well, thank you very much, we'll buy it from Russia, or thank you very much, we'll buy it from China. That doesn't help us, not when it comes to jobs and not when it comes to our companies losing out on that work. But there are other things we can do.
Analysts say Congress is likely to push for sanctions and may try to block U.S. arms sales to the kingdom.
Congress is, of course, going to push on this, especially ahead of the November elections. But I don't expect a sanctioning of Saudi Arabia.
Ustun cited Trump's close relationship with the Saudis and his comments about how he views the arms deal, saying he does not expect any major sanctions. Cindy Sain, VOA News, the State Department.
Well, Pope Francis has accepted the resignation of Washington Cardinal Donald Wuerl, who has been implicated in a sexual abuse scandal that has rocked the Roman Catholic Church. Early this year, Wuerl replaced Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, the Archbishop of Washington, who was accused of misconduct related to the scandal. Wuerl came under scrutiny for his handling of sex abuse cases when he was Bishop of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, between 1988 and 2006. A Pennsylvania grand jury found in August that more than 300 Catholic priests sexually abused at least 1,000 children over the last 70 years, and church leaders did all they could to cover it up. Wuerl denied the grand jury allegations that he protected abusive priests. He says he acted with diligence with concern for the victims and to prevent future acts of abuse. Wuerl, who will be 78 in November, technically handed in his resignation at age 75, the normal retirement age for bishops and cardinals. Francis, however, did not accept his resignation at that time. Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Still ahead on Africa 54, changing the face of African aviation. But first, a look at Friday's headlines.
In In Uganda, at least 31 people are dead after floods triggered a landslide in Bukalasi on the eastern part of the country. In Ivory Coast, two of the country's largest political parties face off in local elections Saturday after an acrimonious split that is making some voters nervous ahead of a presidential poll in 2020. Researchers in London have wiped out a population of mosquitoes in a lab using gene editing for the first time. In South Africa, Pik Botha, who became the global face of South Africa's apartheid movement as Pretoria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, has died. Finally, in Armenia, the International Organization of La Francophonie appoints Rwandan Louise Mushikiwabo as the new Secretary General of the Global Association of French-Speaking Nations in a ceremony in the Armenian capital.
Safe and reliable airline transportation is a key infrastructure need for Africa's growing economies. Tonight, we are focusing on the need to open up Africa's skies. Africa 54's Heidi Adams-Fitzpatrick takes us inside on one airline's plan to change the face of African aviation.
It used to be that when you check the flight boards at major U.S. international airports, most of the flights going to and from Africa weren't on African airlines. Well, that's changing. And we're here at Dulles International Airport in the U.S. capital to find out more about the shift in the business of air travel. Every day, 78 international flights depart and land at this airport. Only 2 will take you directly to Africa on an African airline. That's why the ticket counter at Ethiopian Airlines is bustling. Passengers check in for a 13-hour non-stop to Addis Ababa.
Final destination today is Johannesburg, and chose Ethiopian Airlines because it was very reasonable, and also the service has been absolutely fantastic when we've flown it previously.
I've been using Ethiopian Airways to other destinations like to Nigeria, South Sudan, Rwanda. I've also used Ethiopian Airways on international flights. My family is based in Washington, D.C., so Addis Ababa has become another home.
Ethiopian is one of 7 African airlines cleared for direct flights to the United States. The East African carrier connects passengers in 4 major U.S. cities to 55 destinations in Africa. Nigusu Worku runs the airline's U.S. operations.
Air comes of 320 passengers, and we are finalizing for boarding. Let's go in and see.
On board a 777, he explains Ethiopian's expansion plans.
We have a Vision 2025 to be a leading aviation group in Africa and connect Africa to the rest of the world. We have invested a lot in our fleet. Currently, we are proud to operate young fleet in the whole world. Our average fleet age is 5 years, whereas the industry age is like 9 years. So we are operating younger fleet than the rest of the world, which helps us a lot to enhance safety of our operations.
In the past 10 years, Ethiopian Airlines has quadrupled its passenger count to nearly 10 million. Right now, it is Africa's fastest growing and most profitable airline, outpacing South African Airways and regional rival Kenyan Airways, both of whom have been struggling financially. Still, South African rules the routes from Washington to West Africa. Kenyan Airways was recently cleared for direct flights between Nairobi and New York. That must make for a very tough, competitive landscape. What is Ethiopian Airlines doing differently to win that game?
Competition makes you work hard, smarter. So it's good to have competition. That way we can enhance our efficiency, we can enhance our productivity. So that is the only sure way to survive in this 21st century. So as we welcome many airlines to fly into the U.S. from Africa.
The airline business is changing inside Africa too. These flights are not just flying across the Atlantic, they're flying north, south, east, west, across Africa. Earlier this year, 23 African countries launched a single aviation market to improve connectivity on the continent, reduce airfares, and boost economic growth, clearing the way for African carriers to challenge global aviation giants for dominance at home, and ending the days when the easiest or safest way to travel inside Africa was via Europe or the Middle East. This flight is about to take off. Ethiopian Airlines says the African sky is not the limit. They hope to show the world what the future of African aviation can look like. Hayley Adams Fitzpatrick, VOA News, Washington.
Well, I want to go back to Pennsylvania, where we were earlier trying to talk to Professor Nyaka Lagoke of Lincoln University. Professor, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm here.
Yes, and yes, I did ask you the question about this breakup in the coalition of political parties in Ivory Coast, and the question was, why should it cause so much tension just because they've decided they no longer want to stay together?
Yes, a very complicated situation in the country, and we had Gbagbo Laurent was in power, and then, of course, the RDR, the PDCI came together, and then they put together a coalition, and then they defeated Gbagbo militarily, and after Gbagbo was supposed to have been defeated electorally. Then after the rise of Mr. Ouattara to power, there was a ruling coalition composed of those two political parties and many other small political parties. But recently, there are news, and Mr. Ouattara is showing some interest, to either stay in power after the end of his second term, or he's trying to put somebody else after, after his term. And then it looks like he had promised Mr. Bédié that after, his term in 2020, the former political party, the former ruling political party, PDCI, will come back to power. Mm-hmm. And Alassane Ouattara seems not to be respecting his words. So then, of course, there is a dissension between those two political parties. But there is also another one within Mr. Ouattara's own political party. The leader of the rebellion, the Speaker of the House, Soro Guillaume, is now leading another civil, so far, rebellion against Mr. Ouattara within his own political party. And there are some independent candidates who claim Soro Guillaume, who are competing against the candidates chosen by Mr. Alassane Ouattara. So people are thinking that something is going to become more tension in the country after October 13th.
There is a lot of accusations, a counter-accusation, including Ouattara supporters accusing the PDCI of reverting to the tribal politics that caused the trouble in the first place. What should be done? What can be done at the moment to create at least a sense of cohesiveness within the country and perhaps a peaceful coexistence into the future beyond 2020?
Again, it all depends on Mr. Ouattara. So far, he's the leader of the country, and when he freed, Simone Gbagbo and some hundreds of political prisoners in August, we were waiting to see Mr. Ouattara engaging the entire political elite, so that they can have a serious conversation about reconciliation and peace. But he's not doing that. And then the countries seem to be going to another conflict, and then all the signs are, showing that we are going for another conflict.
Well, we hope for the best that there will be peace. Nyaka, we appreciate your perspective. Nyaka Lagoke is a professor of Pan-African Studies at Lincoln University in Pennsylvania.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. Women working to reduce digital gender inequality in Africa have gathered in Accra, Ghana for the second annual African Summit on Women and Girls in Technology. Organizers say they put the event together to consolidate efforts by policymakers, activists, academics, entrepreneurs, and community leaders to get an equal share of the digital dividends earned since the creation of the web. A global study by the Alliance for Affordable Internet indicates that women, in some cases, earn up to 50% less than men in identical roles. A report released by the foundation early this year revealed that about $408 million earmarked for African governments to increase internet access, especially for women and girls, has not been used. Well, and finally, one of the world's least wired countries is growing ever more connected. Cuba still lags behind the rest of the Western Hemisphere in internet connectivity, a legacy of government control of technology and communications that began to ease under former President Raul Castro. Public access to internet in Cuba was limited to tourist hotels until 2013. But then the government authorized Wi-Fi hotspots and cyber cafes. Better access is motivating more young people to vlog, stream live on Facebook, and create YouTube channels, even though web connection is still too expensive for most Cubans. And that's what is trending today. Well, we want to end our show today with a music video by Malawian artist Angel Bekani, best known by her stage name Sanji. Here's our song, Mai Wanguilo. From all of us in Washington, have a great weekend.
Abamba hapa nyumba doing nothing at all. Anakunyinyilika ninjala. Know that she be stressing and piling up a little bits and then that she tell you says opusa zindipanga. Amatibola business, manda si olo freeze, umuntu samalanda. It's in the love and money, oh. Bali mai wanguilo. In between the pride and excellence. Bali mai wanguilo. Maiwo yankula bambo kumamba ukapezeka samanyada umangozi wazapepa maiwa mwana samwe mwetela ndevu maiwa mbano salekelela ndeu ngadi mbintano salala takuseu kunshini adendekela dengu. African women see it all, they abuse their rules, but they choose to be about the way. African women, if you know that they living inside the circle, if you ask me with my strength, I say it's in the love and money, oh.